afternoon. I call to order the City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for April the 21st, 2022. Roll call, please.
Ballard.
Present.
Burrell. Oh, she got booted, looks like. Just a second. Okay, Flavia, are you there? You're muted.
Yes.
Great.
Yes,
Thank you.
I am here. Thank you.
Clapper
Here.
and Throckmorton.
Here.
Okay. We have no minutes to be approved at this time. Are there reports, resolutions, and communications?
We do not have reports, resolutions, and communications at this time.
Okay, I will just advise everyone that this is a hybrid format, and we have one of our zoning board members on Zoom with us this evening. And then we'll also be taking public comment through Zoom as well. Okay, so the petitions that are continued to our May 26th meeting are as follows. V-04-22 Southern Indiana Medical Park, V-12-22 City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission, and V-14-22 Chris and Betsy Smith. Tonight, the petitions to be heard are V-09-22 Patrick and Rachel McAleer, V-10-22 CFC Properties, CU-11-22 Hat Rentals LLC, and CU-13-22 Wheeler Mission Ministries. So we're going to start with petition V-09-22 Patrick and Rachel McAleer. Staff report, please.
Great. Just a moment. Alrighty, let's see here. Okay. All right, as Ms. Clapper said, our first petition tonight is for 935 West 7th Street. You can see located here at the southeast corner of West 7th and North Elm Street. That's strange. Sorry, it looks funny. Okay. The property has been developed with a single-family house in the last few years. The current zoning is residential small lot, R3, comprehensive plan, mixed urban residential. And again, as I said, a single-family dwelling was built on the property in the last couple of years. Immediately to the north, across 7th Street, is Banneker Center, a community center located in the near west side. And then there is single-family surrounding on the east and south and west, as well as a place of worship to the west across Elm. The request before you tonight is a determinate sidewalk variance from sidewalk requirements for new single-family development adjacent to existing pedestrian network in the R3 zoning district. So at this particular site, there is sidewalk along 7th Street on the northern portion of this lot, as well as sidewalk across 7th Street on Elm, immediately adjacent to Banneker. The property has been developed with new construction of a detached single-family dwelling after a number of conversations with the petitioner over a number of years and a couple of planners. The petitioner was approved to build the dwelling with a certificate of zoning compliance and building permit that was received in September of 2019. This was, of course, before our zoning map update, so the comparable district at that time was residential core RC, and the requirement for new single-family development adjacent to existing sidewalk networks is that a concrete sidewalk with a minimum width of 5 feet would be required in that district. That is still the requirement for the current district, but because this certificate of zoning compliance was approved under the old code, we're referencing the old code as well. So you can see here, this is the over the aerial shot of the plan for the property, the home here in the middle, and then sidewalk shown here. This is new sidewalk shown on the bottom of the screen, existing sidewalk here to the left. And through consultation with the department, a 6-foot sidewalk and curb along the property is what was determined to be required and feasible, and is also allowed by code, with that slight deviation from the 5 feet I mentioned earlier. So some of the comprehensive plan goals that we sometimes look to when discussing determinate sidewalk variance requests are related to connections, to being able to improve existing connectivity to centers such as the Banneker Community Center, and being able to improve safety for those who choose to be pedestrians or not choose to be, some who have to be pedestrians in our neighborhoods, and remove them from the immediate auto-centric roads immediately adjacent. So this is the site as of a couple of weeks ago. This is looking from the south and north. So you can see the petitioner's new home there, as well as some landscaping and fence that have been added, as well as a large amount of gravel that, whether this petition is approved or not, will probably need to be removed. This is functionally a driveway, which is not allowed at this scale at this location and wasn't on the approved site plan. But this is the view facing south on Elm and then a little bit further back. So when we realized, going through our records, that the sidewalk that was agreed upon here and required by code was not built, we contacted the petitioner with a notice of violation, that they had violated their certificate of zoning compliance, and that their occupancy is contingent upon meeting those requirements, and one of the requirements is for a new home to build sidewalk, which the petitioner does know. We have extensive emails with former staff discussing the requirements for this property. So then the petitioner decided to request the variance as opposed to building. So just for reference, this is what it looked like before they built. I think it's good for kind of some scale of, of what has been there, how high up the house is, whether or not it appears there might be room for a sidewalk. At the time the property was looked at, again by staff and the petitioner, and then now with current engineering staff, also went out and looked just to discuss the feasibility of a sidewalk here, and agreed with planning and transportation staff that there is feasibility to build the required sidewalk here. So we wanted to just put in the reference for what was there before they changed a little bit of the topography on that side. Just a moment, thank you. So for this request, this is still a development standards variance, the standard to build a sidewalk. So the first you'll be familiar with, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Injury to the public health and welfare of the community is found with the allowance to not install a sidewalk at this location because it limits improvement of the connectivity to the community center and possible future connection to the south. There are no sidewalks immediately to the south. There are multiple properties. Were those to develop in the future, if there's no sidewalk here, then no sidewalk will be required there, because the way that the sidewalk requirement works, you only have to put in the sidewalk for new single family if you're immediately adjacent to existing sidewalk. That's a change we made in, 2017 or 2018, because people's concern about having to put in sidewalks for single family that were never going to connect. So we worked with members of the public and the council and changed the regulations to what they are now, which is only if you're part of an existing network, then you need to extend the network. So that's the case here as well. Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Adverse impacts to the use and value of surrounding area with the proposed variance are found The variance is expected to have off-site negative consequences as it will continue existing design that lacks sidewalk connection to the existing sidewalk on the north side of the street, as well as part of the network north of 7th, which is obviously that connection is something that we discuss in the comprehensive plan and in the UDO as a community, that is something we are looking for. And then finally, strict application of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulty in use of the property, that the practical difficulties are peculiar to the property in question, and that the development standards variance will relieve those difficulties. No practical difficulties are found at the property. A compliant sidewalk can be constructed. There is enough room for that to be done, which was determined before the home was built. The site will continue to be able to be used, and it's a single-family development as it is today, even if a sidewalk is built. And we have not seen any data or reasoning indicating that it is practically difficult to use the site if a sidewalk is required. So the way that the code works, there are also extra criteria to be considered when discussing determinate sidewalk variances. In brief, those include topography issues, that pedestrian traffic isn't reasonably anticipated in that area, that adjacent lot or tracks are at present developed without sidewalks, no reasonable expectation that they would be able to continue, and or that the location is such that a complete network is on the other side, and that uniformity of development in the area would best be served by deferring the sidewalk construction to a later date. So for those who are unfamiliar, determinate sidewalk variance does not mean you never build it. It means that the city, if the city finds need to have it be built in the future, that this petitioner would be the person who would be paying for it and building it. So they are deferring that build to sometime in the future. And so that is our option for sidewalk variances. You can see here, based on that list that I just described, the department did not find any criteria to be met. Again, professional engineering staff went out to the site both before the house was built and today, and found that it is not impractical to build a sidewalk. We do sometimes find that they're impractical and have to either not have them or have them be built in different ways. That is not the case here. Obviously, this property is immediately across from the Banneker Center, so adding more safe, additional length of safe passing for pedestrians, including children, that could be using that center would be helpful. It does tie into an existing network, both on the north side of this property and on the north side of 7th. No pedestrian network exists on the west side of Elm. And again, this lot has sidewalk on the north side, which will be, which this would connect to with a safe and compliant corner addition here as well, which would be a good addition for that sidewalk. And there's also the connection, the argument that there's a connection to the north of 7th. So based upon the written report and the findings of fact above, the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings and deny V0922, requiring that the petitioner does build the sidewalk, which they were required to do when they built their home. And I did want to let you all know, we haven't dealt with this in a little while, so I don't think it'll be familiar to everyone, but we received correspondence both in support and against the variance since the packet went out. Per state statute and our own rules of procedure, we cannot pass that information on to you within 5 days of the hearing. So we received a handful of, I think, 6 or 7 contacts total. If one of those people is here and says, hey, I wrote a letter, then I can give it to them and they can give it to you, and we can display it, or I can display it, excuse me, on the camera so that Flavia can see it as well. But just in case for members of the public who are present, if you don't, the Board of Zoning Appeals is different than the Plan Commission. It's quasi-judicial, and you have to send in anything that you are interested in being in the packet before the packet goes out, which is the Friday before the hearing. Statutorily, we're not actually even required to submit any of that to the Board of Zoning Appeals, but we do submit everything we get So just in case, so the public knows and that the BZA knows that happened as well. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Jackie. So we are to the petitioner's representative. If you'd like to step to the podium. If you could state your name, and then I'll swear you in.
My name is Patrick McAleer. Okay.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yes, much.
Perfect. My name is Patrick McAleer.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Okay, great. Thanks. Oh, okay, perfect. Good. Let me know when it starts. Okay. Good evening. My name is Patrick McAleer. My wife Rachel and our 6-day-old son Owen are participating through Zoom. This is Owen's first Zoom. We live at 935 West 7th Street on the corner of 7th and Elm, and we appreciate the opportunity for the BZA to hear our petition, especially on such a lovely spring evening here in Bloomington. Most importantly, we want to express our appreciation for all of our neighbors who have stopped by, called, emailed, signed the petition, and have shown up here or on Zoom. As difficult as this process has been, your support has energized us when we need it the most, especially these last few weeks. Our presentation makes the presumption that the BZA members have had the chance to read our petitioner's statement and have driven by the property. In the interest of everyone's time, I'm going to be as brief as possible, as there isn't enough time to go into all the detail and background included in our petitioner's statement. As I mentioned, we have a 6-day-old son and just returned from the hospital on Monday evening, so please bear with me as I'm a little bit sleep deprived. First, I'd like to outline our presentation. Is the presentation up there? No, I should mention that first. Yeah, the presentation that I provided. Karina, can you stop my time? Yeah. Well, no, a presentation. I sent that on the 7th. It is a PDF. Do you mind if I put this here, Jackie? No. Thanks. Very thirsty. I have it here on a thumb drive if you... Okay. No problem. No problem. Better you than me. I would have no idea what to do right now. It's in the packet. I saw it in the packet. Okay. Yeah, it should just come up as the first page there. That's the petitioner's statement. Yeah.
This or further?
Further.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. It'll be kind of like it'll look like a PowerPoint. Yeah, exactly. There it is. That's, oh, nice. Okay, perfect. So I'd like to provide some background on how we got here in the first place, and then provide support based on previous and current UDOs and the transportation plan on why we disagree respectfully and believe a variance should be granted. We'd like to briefly discuss some of the environmental effects of being forced to construct a sidewalk on a portion of North Elm between 6th and 7th, and discuss the negative impacts on our neighbors and our neighborhood. Lastly, I think it's most important to hear from our neighbors in attendance and possibly on Zoom. So first, some background. In 2019, I put an offer on to purchase the lot at 935 West 7th that had been vacant for at least 25 years. I met with the city, Amelia, who was assigned to my permit, and she was delightful. I was immediately told I didn't have to put in a sidewalk, so I started in on the closing process. Maybe a week later, I saw Amelia at the Grand Falloon concert where she was volunteering. We chatted a little bit, and she told me that she might have bad news about the sidewalk and that she was leaving the city. Then I was assigned to my next city planner, Ryan. Ryan informed me I would have to construct a sidewalk to receive a permit. He relayed the message for the city 3 different times in 3 different ways. First, he confirmed I would need to build a curb, have a 5-foot green space, and then a 5-foot sidewalk, like you might see in any new development in Bloomington, which with setbacks wouldn't allow me to build a house wide enough to fit the historical aesthetic of the neighborhood. The width of our lot is only, I thought it was 48, it's actually 46 feet from the last little thing. Then, so after I went back to them and told them that, then he changed his mind, or the city changed their mind, to a 5-foot monolithic curb and sidewalk. Then they came back to me with their final answer, a 6-foot monolithic curb and sidewalk. And when I asked why the change, the city's reasoning, and again, he's just relaying this, was to meet the width of the sidewalk at the Banneker Center. I was a little bit of disbelief, and frankly, I knew nothing about the variance process or UDOs at this point, but Ryan said I could apply for a variance in the future based on the upcoming version of the 2020 UDO that was in progress or final stages. As a matter of interest, and as I've recently found out by measuring myself, as you'll see from my photos a little further in the presentation, the sidewalk at Banneker Center is at its widest point 5 feet at the corner directly across from the house. The majority of it is between 4 foot and 4 foot 4 inches in width. But they want us to build a 6-foot wide sidewalk with a 6-inch curb that will require a 12 to 18-inch wide retaining wall the length of our lot. The explanation based on our last conversation with our 4th city planner, Karina, was, quotes, because Banneker has a 6-foot sidewalk and it needs to be consistent. That's the city's final answer. For those of you who are keeping track at home, our 3rd city planner was Keegan. Keegan wasn't really too involved. So we built the house. We made a large investment and improvement to a piece of property in a neighborhood and to a lot that had been the neighborhood canine waste depository for the last 3 decades. Upon completion, we called and texted all the city-approved sidewalk contractors, except for one who was the man who delayed putting in our foundation for 8 months before we moved on to another foundation team. I presumed he was still busy. One contractor got back to me. He came out to give me an estimate and said that he didn't know how to build a retaining wall, so he couldn't do the job. Once we moved in, every passerby would compliment us on our home, and the conversation would eventually move to the difficulty we were having regarding the sidewalk. Never once did someone say it was needed or they supported it going in. All the neighbors were against it. Our neighbors across the street, who are here tonight, asked us not to put in the sidewalk as they wouldn't be able to get out of their driveway if a car was parked there, which has happened to them before. And our friends at the Mercy Mission Church, who have been in the community forever, asked us not to put one in for a host of good reasons, many relating to the fabric of the neighborhood. Our neighbor Carolyn, also in attendance tonight, asked us not to put in a sidewalk as she, rightfully so, is worried about the effects it will have on stormwater runoff and her lovely home's foundation, which she has already had to make major investments in. As you might imagine, trying to assimilate in our new neighborhood in a positive fashion, we put the brakes on the sidewalk. And like almost every residence on a north-south street in the near west side, installed a basic pullout to get our cars off the road, and a berm for our friends at Mercy Mission to get their cars off the street during church. This helps with accessibility. We received many thanks from our neighbors, and that has felt great. Being granted a variance tonight will provide permanent gratitude from us and our neighbors, and protect the fabric of the neighborhood. Can we go to the next slide, Jackie? Thanks. I think that maybe, there it is, yeah, connect. Various members of the city have said there is no doubt we meet the findings to be granted a sidewalk variance. So some of the findings tonight were a little new news for me. That has never been in question. Because we live across from the Banneker Center, which we love, there is a notion that we need to construct a sidewalk to connect to the Banneker Center. The very definition of the word connect proves that installing a sidewalk down a portion of North Elm doesn't connect anything, and it never will. The sidewalk will terminate at the south end of our lot, after paving a nearly 8-foot wide parking lot, 147 feet in length, directly into our neighbor's historic retaining wall and garden bed. Beyond that, going south, there isn't room for a curb, sidewalk, and retaining wall, as you will see from the photographs in the petitioner statement and later in our presentation. Next slide, please. We believe we meet 9 of the 11 sidewalk variances in the 2018 UDO, which our permit was based on. The 2 we don't meet don't apply to an infill lot like ours. We meet 4 of the 5 2020 UDO determinate sidewalk variances. This is all detailed in our petitioner's statement. Next slide, please. Much of the code in the UDO points to the city transportation plan, where the streets in the near west side are described as NR for neighborhood residential. The concluding sentence, and I have it here on my presentation highlighted, is, quotes, priority for NR streets is on maintaining calm streets that create a safe and comfortable environment for walking, even if there are no sidewalks. The transportation plan also details the importance of maintaining the historical fabric of the neighborhood throughout. Next one, please. I'm gonna have a little sip of water here. Okay, in the city's 2002 Master Thoroughfare Plan, it explicitly states for our neighborhood, and it is highlighted, quote, sidewalks and street trees vary. Often there is not enough room for both elements. They show Waldron, Jackson, and William Streets as illustrations. These streets are also, like Elm, 20 feet wide, and there are no sidewalks. Those are the examples they decided to show where sidewalks are not allowed. Additionally, across the street at the Banneker Center, where there is a sidewalk, Elm Street is 28 feet wide, an entire lane of traffic wider than our block. Next slide, please. Everyone knows about climate change. The UDO points to the effects of impervious surfaces, allowing, for good reason, a maximum amount of impervious surface on any lot of 45%. We're currently at a little more than 30%. This was purposeful. Having as little of an environmental impact as possible was important to us in the process of designing and building our home. Adding a 6-inch curb, a 6-foot sidewalk, and a 12 to 18-inch retaining wall would bring us over 60% of impervious surface. We need to also take into consideration the effect it will have on our downhill neighbors from the major increase in stormwater having nowhere to go, and the amount of pollution to move the various utilities, including the natural gas line, our sewer line, and the fiber optic line which feeds Banneker Center, all which run where the retaining wall will need to go down 30 or more inches below grade. There's an overwhelming amount of research on the negative effects of concrete on the environment. The November 2020 PSCI Princeton University report states, quotes, concrete releases an extreme amount of CO2, end quotes. Next slide, please, Jackie. So here I have some pictures. You'll see from these photos going north from 6th to 7th, the sidewalk will never connect to 6th. In its way are historical limestone walls, mature old growth trees, a home, a front porch, and more limestone walls. It will terminate forever in an unmaintained alley. Next slide, please. Okay, berms and pull-offs for safety. Okay, yeah, this is how people park on Elm and on all north-south streets in the near west side. It is really the only way to allow for traffic to for traffic safety and protection from your car getting clipped by cars making their way down the narrow historic streets. Next slide, please. Okay, and here we have, okay, these are just a few more photos of how sidewalks are used in the near west side. Here in the first one on the left there, we have a loyal city employee attempting to keep their city vehicle from getting hit, and I respect that. We've been hit on 7th when we parked in front of our house, just where that van is, as of our neighbors, as of our old next-door neighbors, and recently, our neighbor Barb's car was smashed badly. On Thursday night, we were sitting on our front porch, Rachel and I were, before heading to the hospital early Friday morning, and watched a car get clipped. We yelled for the driver to stop, and he did for a second, and then he sped off. Some of the other photos here, okay, the one of the is kind of how people park. You can see how far the city vehicles are off the curb there. I can't read it, but I think it's like 18 or 20 inches. And then we see the two gentlemen walking down the street. Setting the stage for how far people park off the curb. Remember, this street is 8 feet wider than ours. That's almost an entire lane of traffic. If they were parked on our street against a curb, you can forget the passing of city garbage trucks, school buses, delivery trucks, or worse, in our biggest fear, fire trucks and ambulances. There's also a shot of how pedestrians use the sidewalks when they are available. They don't. It was odd to me too, but people in the near west side walk in the streets, even when there are sidewalks. Next slide, please, Jackie. There are a number of letters and calls into the city, and some of them are in our packet, which I hope you have had the time to review. There are additional details in our petitioner statement on the negative effects a sidewalk will have on our neighbors and the important historical fabric of our neighborhood, so I'll spare you those findings. I believe there are a few community members here this evening that would like to voice their support, and then I would like to conclude. I don't know how this works. I sit down or?
Use it now, and then
Does anybody?
they cannot speak during your time.
Oh,
She
oh.
will give them time later to speak.
Okay, well then I'll conclude first. Presuming that they were able to talk, so just kind of see through that with me. So I just want to again thank them for the support or their upcoming support. And Rachel and I have loved calling our neighborhood home. We really hope it's the decision of the BZA to grant us the variance and with it provide the relief of the unnecessary hardship of constructing the cement pier. The variances are there as the voice of the community, acknowledging unique situations which we fall under. Understandably, variances are not granted easily, but we hope we have proven the uniqueness of our situation and neighborhood. And I ask if you have any questions for me.
We will. That's next.
Okay, that's next.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks you again for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so we are back to the board for questions of staff and petitioner. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. And this is to the staff, please. Did the petitioner file a building plan or permit, some form that included the sidewalk before the permit was issued? So it was your understanding that that sidewalk would be built before the permit was provided to the petitioner?
Correct. Oh, sorry, you can't.
This is
speak
only
unless he
for the
addresses
city,
you.
sorry.
Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, so the final word that you received before you closed on the property itself, so through your due diligence process, right, before you closed on the property, what was the final concrete correspondence from the city regarding, you sounded like 4 different answers there leading
Yeah,
up
they
to
gave me
closing?
4 different answers. The
Okay.
final one was a 6-foot monolithic curb
Okay,
to match the Banneker Center across the street.
okay, and that was just a verbal conversation?
No, that was in the plan that you saw up there. That was-
Okay.
Yeah, that was part of the plan.
Okay.
But under the pretense that Ryan said, there's a new UDO going through, it's going to have a lot of variances, and I think you're going to meet them, and so why don't you just get going on your home? We'll give you the permit, and you can ask for a variance in the future.
Sure, I know Ryan, I know Amelia, so before you closed on the property itself, you had what, I just want to
I
make
had
sure
30 days due
diligence-wise.
diligence, yeah, 30 days due diligence, and so I think, well, yeah, to get the permit, I needed to have the sidewalk on the permit, and it was. So yes, before I closed, did I don't know, I haven't thought that through. Let me think. Before I closed, no, because I got the permit after I closed. So no, I got the permit long after I closed. I'm almost positive of that. Because I believe my due diligence period was only 30 days, and
Right.
it took a long time to get the permit.
Right, that's what I'm saying, coming
Yeah.
from real estate that I'm in,
Right.
making sure like that's legally
Yeah,
binding.
I'm almost positive, Tim, that's the process that took place, because I remember going down to the city in a meeting with Amelia right away, because that was my big concern, was the sidewalk. And, the previous owner said that, he had problems with the city, and said that the previous owner before that had problems with the city, and that's why they couldn't get anything done to get the place sold. So that was my first question to Amelia, and she right away was like, she got back to me and said, no, you will not have to build the sidewalk. And then I saw her, and she's like, I might have news for you. And I was like, and this is how I'm remembering. It's 3 years ago, but
Sure.
as honest I can possibly be, that's how I remember it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions? No? I'm going to go to Flavia. Flavia, do you have any questions?
Yes. My question was similar to Tim's question. So when you purchased this property, your understanding was that you did not have to do the sidewalk?
That's incorrect. When I purchased the property, I closed before I got the permit, but I believe I knew by the time I was closing on the property that I was going to have to build a sidewalk under the pretense that I was going to be able to get a variance, or at least petition for a variance.
Okay. Now, knowing this neighborhood is it's a historic, they are conservancy, and they are working towards getting the historic preservation. Are there any, so what I'm looking at here is there any different types of difficulties, and I guess this is for the staff, when you have a historic district, do they get any kind of, they are not historic district, sorry, they are conservancy, but is there any exception? Because obviously there was no sidewalks previously. And if you drive around the neighborhood, there are very few sidewalks. So in terms of keeping the historic fabric of the neighborhood, does that weigh as a practical difficulty in this case, Jackie?
I would say, as with other variances, it's not an explicit finding to match the historic character, but that could be something that you could weigh in the findings.
Okay. I also have a question about the storm water drainage. Was a drainage engineer consulted on this to know if it's really going to cause any drainage issues for the property below?
No, but when the design is done, then we would consult with Phil Peden at CBU before that is installed. So when the petitioner, had engineer drawings created, when they were going to have them built, first of all, that engineer would be using their calculations to determine whether or not it was feasible, but also then we would check that with CBU at that time.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question for staff. With regard to the practical difficulties of this specific lot, the utilities that were mentioned by the petitioner, the fiber optic cable and the potential conflict with the need to create a retaining wall, how would that weigh in? Because that, to me, does seem
Sure, so
like
that's
a real-
something we could look into more. For example, when he's talking about the impervious surface coverage, this sidewalk doesn't need to go on his parcel. He doesn't own to the edge of pavement. So there is right-of-way room there for 6 feet based on the things that they have submitted. We have not had that property surveyed. Based on surveys that have been submitted with the building permit, there appears to be enough room for this to be built in the right-of-way. It is possible that also a retaining wall would then be required. I don't think we've seen anything indicating that that's for sure. I mean, we haven't seen any plans, engineered plans for a sidewalk here. So yes, I do not know specifically where a wall would be in relation to fiber optic, but as you know, probably we have a lot of utilities that run under sidewalks and streets all over town. That would not be atypical. We, of course, would not do something that wouldn't work or wouldn't be possible. So, you know, when Mr. McAleer is talking about the different designs that were given by various planners, you can just read that in the code, that the base is 5 by 5. If you can't do 5 by 5, 4, and then there are a list of reasons, then you're allowed to do a 6 with curb. And so that is why that decision was made, because there is a tight right-of-way here. We would rather sidewalks be in the right-of-way than have to do pedestrian easements on personal property, affecting impervious surface, and items like that. So I think that's how we got to the 6 foot. I wasn't privy to all of those conversations, but I know some of the things he's describing about the UDO change, nothing was going to change with the sidewalk. I've seen the emails from Mr. Roebling. That was in a conversation related to an ADU that they wanted to build off of the back alley that isn't improved. There were changes in the UDO that would affect that, but the sidewalk, we had just updated those requirements, and as I said, 17 or 18. So when we did the overhaul in 2019, 2020, we didn't really make any changes to that. So yeah, it's hard to know exactly what was said in the past. We are only going by what code requires and what we have seen on site and what appears to be possible. Welcome.
So a question to Mr. Meckler. Sure. Do you have, the property obviously was surveyed, do you have the locations of the utilities and
Yeah,
things?
I just called 811 and they came out and did, and I have some pictures of them, and I sent them to Karina, but I don't think they made it into the packet. But I do have pictures if you want to see them. It goes somewhere between 6 and 8 feet is where the fiber optic line is. The gas line and our sewer line is right there also at the corner.
Okay. Can I follow up with you on a question then? So how is that typically handled? Because of, I mean, I know certain depths with sidewalks aren't that significant unless you're starting to get into curb work. And then, of course, retaining walls do require more depth. So I'm just wondering how.
Yeah, so we would need to see engineered plans to see if there's a way to work around those. So for example, if the fiber optic is 8 feet in, he's building 6 feet, immediately adjacent to the asphalt is what code would call for. So that may be avoidable. And so, but without actually seeing on a plan an engineered drawing for that, we don't feel comfortable saying, oh, this seems tight, you don't have to build it. You know, if he came in with plans that said, look, this isn't going to be feasible because of XYZ, that's what the findings are for, to say, oh, we have something here that makes this impossible, and that's not what
That's
we've
not
gotten
the
so
point
far.
in the process that
Yeah,
you're in. is
and
what
it's
you're
just
saying.
hard, you know, for us from a enforcement standpoint of the UDO, you know, 3 years ago, that conversation wasn't had. They haven't contacted us or tried to say, hey, we think we need to work this out. We're only here because we said, hey, what happened to your sidewalk? And it became an enforcement issue. So there may be, you know, as I think we've tried to say a little bit, I tried to say in the presentation and in the staff report, maybe there are extenuating circumstances, but nothing has been presented that shows that we feel comfortable saying, okay, this isn't worth the connection here.
Okay. Excuse me, wait, you can only speak if we've asked you. Okay, so that's really helpful, just an understanding kind of the process. And so if the petitioner were to move forward with the design of the sidewalk and it were to be found, say they were not successful here this evening, and it would be found that it would be difficult to actually construct, given the grade difference and such like that, then would they have the opportunity to come back and apply for a determinate variance at that point?
Yes, I have to check, because once you apply for a variance, you can't keep applying for the same variance. I think that this body, and Mike can chime in if he wants, if he's probably checking somewhere, he's virtual.
Oh, he's virtual.
Sorry. That I believe you all can unanimously vote to let them bring the same variance back within that amount of time. But yeah, so basically the due diligence of this is why I need a variance typically happens beforehand. And for this type of public improvement that, you know, we we obviously, the city and taxpayers pay for almost all the sidewalks in the community. There are situations in which private property owners pay for them. This is one of them. So we need to be careful about letting those go when we have the opportunity to get them, basically. You know, we did receive some letters from you know, people in the neighborhood citing other ones that had come in and saying, yes, it's positive to get these incrementally. You know, it just kind of depends on your perspective of how those are. But from the city perspective, this is connected to the sidewalk on 7th. We would improve that corner as well. And then it would be, if you were walking south from Banneker, you would at least be able to be on the sidewalk for longer than you are now. And that is an improvement in the network.
Okay. Did you have something you wanted to add, Mr. McLeod?
Just kind of the basic math, and we just asked for confirmation from Karina on this because we were under the impression that a 6-foot monolithic sidewalk, which we had been demanded, included the curb, but does not. Karina's just given us that information. It's a 6-inch curb, a 6-foot sidewalk, and then the retaining wall is going to need to be engineered between 12 and 18 inches. The slope going down south, the hillside, where all the water is going to run off, is about somewhere between hip and chest height. So you can figure that it's got to go down 30 inches and go up about 3 to 4 feet. So it's significant. And just kind of giving, because she mentioned, well, that's 8 feet off or whatever it was. That is 8 feet. 6 inches plus 6 feet plus 18 inches is 8 feet. Just wanted to make sure.
Anybody else from the board who has any questions, follow-up questions?
Yeah, I think just to the petitioner, there's been a significant amount of work obviously done with this. I used to live at 1120 West 8th Street. I'm very familiar with the area, very familiar with Banneker, people who live there still. So in terms of, maybe you can't answer this question, but you said at one point in the beginning, so they referenced Banneker's sidewalk as being 6 feet, and you're saying the true width is 5. Is that?
Based on what Karina said, if you're only including the sidewalk, it's a 5-foot sidewalk with a 5.5-inch curb, so it's 5 feet. But that's just at the corner, right there at the corner of 7th and Elm. But as you go down, the limestone wall in front of Banneker kind of jets out a little bit, so it goes between 4 feet and 4 feet 4 inches. It's kind of like, it's only as wide as it is at its smallest point, so really it's 4 feet, but it is 5 feet at the corner.
Okay. And then just one other, hearing from the, obviously you have neighbors, you've got the letters, someone speaking to the property due south of you, in terms of, as you mentioned, the drainage.
Right.
The foundation, is that person here?
They are here, yes.
Okay. Okay, so that's, I just wanted to clarify, we'd be able to hear from that perspective as well.
Okay, thanks, yeah.
Okay. If there's no other clarification questions at this point, we'll go to the public. We will first hear from members who are in person with us this evening, and then we'll ask if there's anybody on Zoom who would like to make a public comment. So if somebody would like to step to the podium, if you could state your name, and then I'll swear you in. You'll have 5 minutes to speak, up to 5 minutes to speak. So whoever would like to go first.
Before I start, I'd like a clarification from the city.
Could you state your name first, please? Could you just state your name?
I'm William Baus, Bill Baus.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. You can ask your question now.
I try to do that all the time.
Good.
May I get a clarification from the city before I start? I couldn't understand everything you said. So you may have said this. How wide is the platted street there?
I said we only have information based on the survey submitted by the petitioner during the building permit, and it appears that there's at least 8 feet between edge of pavement and their property line. That's the only thing I referenced about width in the right-of-way.
Okay, because it was not my belief that the platted street was wide enough for that to be the case, but I have checked the street widths on a number of the streets in the area, but I haven't, down at the recorder's office, but I have not checked that one. Okay, I'm Bill Baus, and I've lived at the corner well, the end of 8th Street, about 2 blocks from the location of the petitioner's house, for over half a century. I've been a board member or officer of the Near West Side Neighborhood Association since it was created in the 1980s. I'm very familiar with the property and with the neighborhood. First of all, I'll state that the Neighborhood Association has consistently opposed, not just was okay about it, but opposed putting sidewalks on north-south streets where they don't already exist in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is not the same as every other neighborhood. We have narrow streets, and the atmosphere in our neighborhood is more of a small town than it is a big urban area. And we like it that way. We want to keep it that way. And that was, to a great extent, why we had a long process recently to become an historic conservation district. And we want to maintain the character of the neighborhood. The north-south streets are really not well-suited for urban-style sidewalks and curbs. They do not function well in our neighborhood, or would not. There are very few of them. Almost all of the existing ones are in front of institutional commercial buildings, like the Banneker, and that makes sense. We do appreciate the sidewalks on the east-west streets which are much wider and have completely different traffic flow. We put in some traffic calming devices on the east-west streets a few years ago to try to slow traffic down because we don't have stops. The east-west streets, none of them are through streets. They all have stops. And in some cases, they have, traffic calming devices in addition to the stops. We do not believe that the environmental costs, including the production of the concrete, which is very carbon intensive, and the destruction of the green space that this sidewalk would produce is warranted by any connectivity issues, because this sidewalk would not produce any connectivity. It does not connect to anything. This is a sidewalk to nowhere. So I saw somebody cheering there, and we very definitely oppose this. We support the petition. We believe that the neighborhood will be harmed by this sidewalk. And finally, I got here on a bicycle, which is how I get around town almost exclusively. Since I'm going out of town this weekend, I bought gas yesterday. And when I logged it in, I noticed the last time I bought gas was in January. Sidewalks are okay if you're riding on them on a bicycle and don't have any pedestrians, because bicycles and pedestrians are not very compatible. Curbs are a detriment to bicycles. They make it much more dangerous because you don't have any place to go, and on these narrow streets, there's no room to get out of the way of the cars if there's a car that is coming down that street. Thank you.
I'm Peter Dorfman.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you've up to 5 minutes.
Okay, I sent a letter in my capacity as president of the Near West Side Neighborhood Association last week. It arrived too late to make it into the packet. But I'd like to read it into the record because the association really would like to be on the record. Before I do that, though, there's a reason why it didn't arrive in time. We only met with the petitioner last week. I also serve on the neighborhood's design review committee for the Conservation District. We had met with another petitioner who was going to have to do a similar kind of variance request. And they alerted us to the fact that the McAleers were facing the same situation. They got approval to build their house before we had a design review committee, so we never got to review that. So we just assumed that they weren't going to be required to build the sidewalk. So we met with them. I'm not here as part of some lobbying effort on behalf of this petition. I'm here because we asked for the meeting with him. He explained the situation, and the result is this letter, which is dated April 14th. The Board of Directors of the Near West Side Neighborhood Association unanimously support the request by Patrick and Rachel McAleer that they be granted a determinate variance to the requirement that they build a new sidewalk on the Elm Street side of their home on the corner of West 7th and North Elm Street. We believe that requiring the McAleers to build a sidewalk in this location would be environmentally unsound, would make our neighborhood less safe, would be detrimental to preserving the historic character of this neighborhood, which is designated as a local historic conservation district. This neighborhood was developed in the early years of the 1900s as homes for working class people, many of whom were employed at the Showers Furniture Company where the BZA now meets. The homes were small and were on small lots. The blocks on the north-south streets were short and only a few houses were built facing these streets. The north-south streets were and still are narrow and more characteristic of a small town than a major city. There are very few sidewalks on the north-south streets except adjoining institutional commercial buildings. Not only would this sidewalk and curb be out of character for the neighborhood, but it would make this street less safe for bicycles and cars and would have no benefit to promoting the pedestrian traffic and safety since it would never connect to any other sidewalk. Among the other hazards it would create, adding a sidewalk and curb would prevent the neighbors at 1001 West 7th Street from pulling out of their driveway if a car were parked on the street opposite. It would also be adverse to the city's stated goal of reducing carbon dioxide emissions, since the production of a large amount of concrete required to build it and the massive retaining wall which would be needed would release large amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. It would further be contrary to the city's goal of minimizing impervious surfaces. This sidewalk would nearly double the impervious surface on this lot, thereby adding to stormwater runoff. The Near West Side Neighborhood Association has consistently opposed requiring sidewalks to be added to the north-south streets in this neighborhood. This sidewalk to nowhere would be an especially bad use of resources and would be harmful to the neighborhood. Signed, the Near West Side Neighborhood Association Board of Directors, Peter Dorfman, President, Alan Balcom, Vice President, Thomas Payne, Secretary, William Baus, Treasurer, Olivia Dorfman, Member at Large, Karen Duffy, Member at Large, Natalia Galvin, Member at Large. So I thank you for allowing me to put that into the record. One final thing, in reference to Ms. Burrell's question about the historic character of the neighborhood, I was involved in writing the design guidelines for the Near West Side. There is no requirement in those guidelines that a house feature a sidewalk. They're not prohibited, but they're not required, and they would be not in historic character on north-south streets in the Near West Side. Thank you for your attention.
Please state your name.
My name is Tim Clower.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
To 5 minutes.
Good evening. I've lived with my wife Gabrielle at 1001 West 7th Street, which is the property just across Elm, just west of the petitioner's property. I've been there since 2001. My house was there was also an empty lot there. Bloomington Restorations moved a house from West 1st Street, our house, by Crescent Donut, and plopped it down on that lot. And I was fortunate to be able to pull together purchasing the house. I am the person that was mentioned at 1001 that will have difficulty getting out of our driveway. As the petitioner had mentioned, the street narrows by 8 feet, from 28 feet to 20 feet. I measured it from street edge to street edge and curb to curb. As it goes behind our driveway, which we pull on and off of Elm Street with 2 vehicles, I've had several times to go over to the Banneker and ask people to move their vehicles so we could get out. If you add the addition of a curb, even on the street edge, as typical people park, it's going to make that difficult for us. And therefore, and for other reasons I'll quickly mention, I just disagree with the city's findings on the variance criteria. The connectivity part, as has been mentioned, because the fact that the sidewalk is just going to end at the end of the property, as was mentioned, the walls, the other properties, it's not going to continue. The second finding of, the lack of the sidewalk is only deemed negative by the city. I know, as she mentioned, there are people that have spoken in favor of the sidewalk. I have a copy of, and was too late to get it added into the packet, but I have a petition signed by adjoining property owners, members of the Mercy Mission Church, which is directly south of my property and also runs along parallel to Elm Street, as well as some of the board members from the near west side and other neighbors and pedestrians that utilize that street. And basically it just states, as property owners near or adjacent to 935, we wish to support the variances to allow no construction of a new sidewalk along Elm Street bordering this property. We feel the construction of this sidewalk will impede our use of Elm Street in a way that will create a safety hazard for us and other pedestrians. And I also disagree with the finding that there are no practical difficulties. Obviously, getting out of my driveway is one. I think the missing part in all of that is communication and maybe questioning of people that live in the neighborhood or live at least adjacent to what's going to happen. In the past year, we had a handicap spot added in front of our home. Our neighbor's daughter had requested it, even though they have a parking space directly behind their home, because it needed by code to be close to the corner. That spot got moved from in front of her house to in front of our house, but there was never any communication to us that that was going to happen until they were painting the curb and jamming the sign in the yard. I know it's difficult. There are a lot of things in motion and a lot of people, but it would have been nice to have that communication, and we could have. I've called for years whenever someone has owned the property to see if there was a plan or something, because I was worried about this day. I've been told that nothing had been submitted at that point, but that's why there hasn't been a house built there for so many years, because people didn't want to have to put in the sidewalk. And I agree that they shouldn't have to. Incidentally, I'm at the age where I walk for exercise, so I walk in the mornings. Last year, according to my Strava app, I did over 1,200 miles on sidewalks and on streets in Bloomington. I respect the process and why these things, the code is there, but I also think that the variances are there exactly for reasons like this. When you have a historic property where things that blueprint doesn't always fit. In a new development where sidewalks haven't been created yet, it makes total sense. But in this case, and obviously I'm a little biased because I'm affected by it, I just don't think it makes any sense. Thank you for your time.
Do we have anybody else here this evening who'd like to speak to the petition?
Hi, my name is Mary Sloan. Sure do.
Okay. 5 minutes.
I am no longer living in the neighborhood, but I did for the better part of 20 years. I lived in several locations around the petitioner's neighborhood. And most recently, I was living on 6th and Oak Street, which is just right around the corner, with 2 of my young kids. They're not so young anymore, but and I was the kind of mom that let my kids run around the neighborhood all the time. Know a lot of the neighbors. And the Banneker Center was one place that especially my son Atticus went all the time. So walking up and down those side streets with no sidewalks was never a problem for my children. And so on a personal level, I just want to express that. As a parent, there was no problem that there weren't any sidewalks on those side streets, specifically to the Banneker Center. Now, on more of a, kind of from a professional perspective, last July, actually, I left working for the county, but I worked for the county for about 4.5 years in between the auditor's office and the assessor's office. When I was at the auditor's office, I was tasked with tracking all of the enterprise zone deductions and the local tax abatements from the county and from the city. Those granted state deductions give away millions of dollars of tax assessment potential revenue to developers. And then when I went to the assessor's office, and I'm trying to remember the year that I was still at the auditor's office and I was responsible for filing the report to the state. I think it was $25 million of assessed value that were just taken off of the books between the enterprise zone deduction and the 2 different kinds of city and tax abatements, all for big developers. So there's a big revenue hole. And to me, that seems like a little bit of what's going on here. The fact that as the city and this kind of bureaucratic infrastructure that's going to burden an individual property owner with tens of thousands of dollars to, improve this property, again, with a sidewalk to nowhere, that nobody wants, just because it's red tape, just because there's this infrastructure that says, well, you knew at the time of closing that you were going to have to build a sidewalk, so, it just doesn't really make any sense. This is a town where people live. This is a neighborhood where kids run around, where people know their neighbors. And it's safe. It's walkable, even without those, those north and south side streets, even though they don't have sidewalks. So, and then when I went to the assessor's office, I was part of tracking building permits and keeping track of new construction. And there's a broad range of things that the assessor's office does. But one of the things that I also noticed, so in the new construction, when there's large developments put in, and this is again state statutes, state law, that developers receive extreme lowered assessed value on their property while they're building because they add the infrastructure. So for several years, while developments are going in, they're literally paying almost nothing in property taxes because they're doing things like adding sidewalks. So from a personal citizen level, this just seems like there's a real disparity. And again, I know some of these things are coming from the state level, but I think there's an opportunity here to really make a commitment to actual citizens of our town and not burden them with this huge expense for something that nobody wants just because it's in the rule book. So I'd just like to, speak, in favor of the petitioner. It's really kind of seems ridiculous from my viewpoint, and also just another way that people are getting frustrated that a lot of the infrastructure does seem to benefit developers and not small citizens. So with that, I'll close.
Thank you. Is there anybody further? Please step to the podium.
I have some pictures that I took today. Is it possible you could show them to everybody on your screen, or can I pass them out? Is it okay for her to show pictures? I took today.
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
If it's easy to accomplish. Yeah, that's fine. No, if it's not too hard to get it done, yeah.
Or I could pass.
Sure.
You're good, because we need Flavia needs to be able to see them as well.
Thank you so much. I'm not a public speaker. I just talk from the heart. That's what you can do.
Okay, so they go this way, so I just want to make sure you're getting what you want.
I wanted that one to be first.
Okay, and then down like this.
Yes.
Okay.
Okey-dokey.
Let's see here.
You're upside down.
Am I upside down? I can't wear my glasses. Okay. There we go.
That doesn't show too good, does it?
Let's see.
Still, it's a little better, I guess.
Karen, can you ask Flavia if she can see that?
Can you see that, Flavia?
Maybe your light's too bright.
No, I cannot see it.
Sorry, Katz, can you pan to one of the big screens? Or I don't know if you can, but so that Flavia can see these.
See. It's possible.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Flavia, you can see it now?
Yes, I can see them.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, please state your name.
Carolyn Baumgartner.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you're up to 5 minutes.
Okie dokie. So I live directly to the.
Speak into the microphone, please.
Yes, I've got a big voice. I live directly at, there we go, that's loud. 210 North Elm Street, and also we own the property at 206, my son-in-law and my son couldn't be here, at 206 North Elm Street. So this will impact us, I feel, it's unbelievable how much, because of the water. But let me say this, I want to thank Patrick and his lovely family for building on this property that sat vacant for years. My sons lived in the house in 210 for 11 years. And then they said, Mama, you need to retire. We're moving you here from Colorado. Hard move, but I'm going to tell you, I love it here. And they said, you can just live, we're just going to, what's ours is yours. And I get to live in this beautiful home. And that being said, and then the house next to me was a shack. We called it the Shack. And it was literally, and the boys bought it. And now it's called, I don't know, it's really beautiful. Lauren Woods did a wonderful job on it. And we don't rent it out. We just let, right now, Sean's families, it's their home when they come here to visit. But anyway, that all being said, I have dealt with the drainage problems for the last 10 years. And so I talked to a man at the city. That's my cute little house. And you can see the wall there, the limestone wall. That was all broken down and everything. And the boys spent thousands of dollars for getting it all put back, and it goes all the way around and repaired. And I've taken great pride in my house, and I want to get back to Patrick. When he built this beautiful custom home, in our neighborhood and made it retro to fit the neighborhood. I just couldn't believe that he wanted to do that. It was a dumping ground for dogs to, do their thing and be left there many times that I picked up and other neighbors picked up. And so it was an eyesore, and the smell wasn't that wonderful either. I'm not a good speaker, so just bear with me. I went to City Hall, if you want to show them. Yeah, and that's my retaining wall around my house between 210 and 206. And you see all the river rock I've had put in the front every year. The water just gushes down the street because you can see it's very, very steep hill. Maybe you go to the next one. Okay, this is my, okay, this is interesting. You see, I have that's the retaining wall there that belongs to the city, and then that is an alleyway that belongs to the city. And you see, hopefully I get a new driveway soon, but that's my broken up driveway. But, okay, that water comes off of that hill, and on that, and I put river rocks there. We paid to have rock put on the city's ground there, out of pocket. And then you see that beautiful thing I did all myself. I'm so proud of it. It goes all the way back because of drainage problems. And every year I have mulch put down, fresh mulch. And so the city guy, when I first moved in, I said, oh man, the water, well, first it was $8,000 for the drainage going right into the crawl space, and then it was $6,000, and then it was $10,000. I said, we've got to do something. And he said, well, it's not much you can do. He goes, plant some things on the hill. And he said, put some trees in and plant. And I said, is that okay? And he said, yes, ma'am, do it, because it's okay. So, oh, really? Well, I got to talk faster. Anyway, so all of that will be torn out, and the curb abutment will be right where that cement is, right there. And that's where people will be jumping off of the sidewalk there in my driveway. That's where they'll be jumping off. My house sits real close to the front street, and the other one just showing them, if you'd be so kind. And I'm going to be impacted, I feel, the most. Nothing against, all this water is a problem. And the way it is now, it's just helped so much. He's got grass in, and they're wonderful neighbors. And I just ask you, have a heart. Please, have a heart. He's a young man with a young family. And $30,000, and me, have a heart. I'm retired. I don't have a lot of money anymore. Darn it, and I love you all. Thank you very much.
Just a sec, let me get this fixed, if that's okay.
Timer here.
Hello, my name is Sean Frew. Yes, I don't have a lot to say, but my husband and I own the properties directly south of the Petitioner, where my mother-in-law lives, in 210 North Elm Street. And then we also own 206 North Elm Street, where my parents spend part of their time. And again, I don't have a lot to say other than both of those houses are close to the street, so there's most likely never going to be any sidewalks that would connect to this sidewalk. And this sidewalk would end, as you saw, like either in the city alley or in our gravel driveway. So I just feel, we lived at 210 North Elm Street for about 10 years before she moved in. And we had a friend with a wheelchair, a kid with a wheelchair, I'd say. And I just feel like for accessibility, honestly, is easier just in the street where you're not trying to navigate getting off on a gravel road. Just staying on the flat street. There was not really ever much pedestrian traffic down that road, and just keeping in with the neighborhood of, not having a lot of sidewalks on many of the north-south streets. So again, I love the house. I think it's a beautiful addition to the neighborhood, and I don't feel like a sidewalk would be a positive addition, That's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Anyone else
Yes, we have 3 Zoom hands. Okay, so first, I believe so, because you'll see them up there because they'll be, you'll see their name. Yeah. Hold on just a second. Miss Galvin, can you unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Great, we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Hello, could you please state your name? I need to swear you in.
Sure, my name is Natalia Galvin.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 5 minutes to speak to this petition.
Okay, thanks. As I said, my name is Natalia Galvin, and I live on the Near West Side. I live on a corner in the Near West Side where one side has a sidewalk that was updated last year and one side that has no sidewalk on Waldron. Incidentally, as Patrick has mentioned, cars often do get clipped when parked on the street with sidewalks. My Toyota Highlander was hit while parked one afternoon in a hit and run in early 2020 on West 6th Street and incurred thousands of dollars worth of damage. My neighbors have also incurred similar damage, so I did want to mention that because our east-west streets are so narrow. Unfortunately, I have personal experience with that. And I also want to mention another hat I wear as the 9th District Chair of the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus and as President of the Monroe County Chapter of the National Organization for Women. I'm involved in a lot of community events. So last summer and even prior, my groups would often volunteer or partner at events like with El Mercado markets that were held at the Banneker Center. So often when events are held at the Banneker Center, because the streets are closed down, the closest place to park is the street in question over on Elm Street in between 6th and 7th Street. So why would I drive to Banneker if I only live a block away? Well, often I would bring heavy tents or supplies that honestly, I was just not strong enough to carry a long distance. So I apologize, as I am probably somebody who has parked and blocked my neighbor Tim's driveway. That's a very heavily used street in the summer, and it does not make any sense to make that street even narrower. I joined my neighbors in disagreeing about the need for a sidewalk to nowhere. As I stated, I'm very active in the community. I often help flyer for our Near West Side food truck events or other events that I'm coordinating. I've never felt unsafe walking on Elm nor on Waldron, which is my street that does not have sidewalks. Because the sidewalk would only connect to the alley and then disconnect, it just makes no sense to me, as the residents stated previously. I'm grateful for Patrick and his family, and also for Tim and Gabrielle for being such thoughtful neighbors. I do not want to see them unfairly burdened on something that we do not need in our neighborhood. Sidewalks to nowhere will not be a positive addition. So I'm happy to, spend an hour and a half today to say that. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Middendorf, are you able to unmute?
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
We can. Could you please state your name?
I'm Dr. Joan Middendorf. I live at 1010 West 7th Street, which is just a couple doors up and opposite side of the street on 7th Street from where Patrick and Rachel live.
Great.
And I'm going to have a different viewpoint from most of
Ms. Middendorf? Or Dr. Middendorf? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 5 minutes.
Yeah. I think there's a factor that hasn't really been brought up very much. When the petition was presented to me, that was brought around the neighborhood, I was told that, the really hard thing is that the McAleers are going to have to pay $20,000 and that this is an unfair burden. And this was one of the main topics brought up as the petition was brought around. And so I really feel like for the safety of the neighborhood, because my grandkids come and visit a lot, we really do need a sidewalk there, because for ADA, for people coming to the Banneker Center, we need a sidewalk. And then eventually someday, as the neighborhood improves more and more, we've got sidewalks on East-West Street, North-South streets on Maple and Fairview. Nobody would say those are bad to have those sidewalks there. Those are great sidewalks. And the houses all the last houses in the 8 years that were built on East-West Street, those are houses at, those houses are 1003 West 9th Street. They had to put in a sidewalk, and that's along John Street. 918 West 9th Street, they had to put in a sidewalk. I think it's 918 West 8th Street. They had to put in a sidewalk. 405 North Oak Street, all those houses. So I'm kind of unclear why these 3 previous houses in a similar situation were told by the city they had to put in a sidewalk within the last 8 years, but now somebody wouldn't have to put in a sidewalk. And I did get to talk to 2 of those homeowners. Both of them told me that, Lisa Marie Napoli told me that she resisted when she had to put in a sidewalk, but in retrospect, she's really glad she did. And Sandra and Fiona Kleiman, they told me they really think like it adds a lot to their property to have the sidewalk. So I think there's something about the money. So what I'd like to ask the zoning committee and the city, is there any way that the city could help with the funding of the sidewalk? So that's not like this secret issue that's keeping us from eventually getting in north-east-west sidewalks, because north-south sidewalks, because it is really a safety factor. You're riding, whether I'm riding my bike or walking, whether I'm by myself with my dog or with my grandkids, you have to be really careful of the cars on those streets. And I feel like it's just a bad safety factor, and especially that close to Banneker Center, that I hope the city will take into account. And eventually, maybe the sidewalk only goes halfway down now. And I do have sympathy that water will be going down there, so something needs to be done with the drainage to help the houses there. Can the city take care of that so the houses aren't just stuck with it? But I really feel like there could be some kind of a compromise here, because I do feel like it's very important as we keep developing this neighborhood to get more sidewalks. But I think secretly it's the issue that the people don't want to pay because maybe they used up all their money building their house. I don't know what it is, but I already heard tonight somebody said they're going to have to pay $30,000 to put in that sidewalk. And I think secretly that's a big issue for why they don't want to do it. So, but I did talk to neighbors who live at, I talked to Chris and Sarah Culver. They have 3 kids and live at 11,000 West 7th Street. I don't know if they were able in time to write a letter. I did enter a letter. I did send a letter, so you can enter my letter into the record. But they also said that they feel like for safety, there should be sidewalks. So there are people in our neighborhood. The neighborhood association is saying we think there should be, but that was just the people who were at the meeting. They didn't poll the neighborhood. They didn't ask the neighborhood. They're just putting in the opinions of the people that signed it. Okay?
Thank you.
So,
Oops.
yeah,
Sorry.
I think that it will improve the safety of the neighborhood. That is not a good street, and it's not very safe. And eventually, as we get more sidewalks, everywhere there is a sidewalk, not to be in the street walking with the cars is way safer. Please help us with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have Ms. Brown. Are you able to unmute?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Could you please
swear you in?
Okay, could you please state your name?
My name is Cheryl Brown.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. I'm representing Mercy Mission Church, which is the church right across the street from the property in question. I don't only represent the church, but I also represent the neighborhood also. I have lived in this neighborhood over 60 years. And the church has been there for many, many years. It's one of the oldest churches in the neighborhood. It is probably a historic church. There are some streets that have sidewalks, and they're wide enough to have sidewalks. This is one of those streets that is not wide enough for sidewalks. So I don't agree that we need a sidewalk on this street. I've been going to Banneker Center since I was young, along with a lot of other people in the neighborhood. We didn't have a problem walking on any of these streets over here. I know traffic has picked up and you have to be a little careful, but when you're in a car, you have to even be more careful because cars do not do well on these small streets. So historically, I think we should leave the streets as they are because that's the historic aesthetic of the neighborhood. And I think that the church would have a big issue with a sidewalk being there. That's the only place we have to park is right where he has that gravel placed for us. We're a lot older group, hoping to get some younger ones in there. But right now we need to park close to our church. The other thing is in the wintertime, you do not have a place to park at all because you do not clear the streets well. They don't even go to the curb. All they do is go down the middle of that street. Now, there's no curb there now. I don't know what they would do if there was a sidewalk there. They don't go down but the middle of the street. You can't even park in the wintertime when there's snow. So I don't want anything else placed there that prevents any more not being able to park. I think that what we're asking for is not minimal. I think that we're asking for something that is quite easy to do. Just let it be like it is. I have gone to Banneker Center and I've unloaded stuff. I've done a lot of work over there and I've always had places to park right over there at the center. And Banneker Center has asked people not to park right there on that street. They've asked them to park down at Girls Club or to park down at the park where the park has parking, which is just a block away. So Banneker doesn't have an issue with us parking there. I think they've asked people to park in the parking that the city park has right down the street. So I think that we ought to leave the parking as it is, leave the green space as it is, and leave the neighborhood alone. I think we're doing fine. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the last one we have is Rachel McAleer. She's obviously a petitioner, so she can't speak during this time.
Okay.
But the petitioner does have 5 minutes and 40 seconds reserved. So Ms. McAleer, when it's time, Ms. Clapper will let you know, and if you want to speak at that time, you can.
Right.
So that's our last one.
Okay, and that's our last one? Okay. So then we are back to the petitioner for any reserved time. And it's an opportunity for Rachel to speak as well.
Yeah, I would probably just ask Rachel. She obviously has something to say, so if she would like to say something, that would be great.
Yep.
I'd also like to again thank everybody that did show up and support, and for all of your comments and time and effort that it takes to be here. We could all be somewhere else, and so I appreciate that greatly.
Thank you. How much time is there in reserve?
Just under 5, it's about 5:35.
Okay, great. Could you please state your name?
Rachel McAleer?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have about 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I was just reading through the petition overview from what the city had stated. And in the first area, it does state in their overview that they're holding us to the 2018 UDO requiring a 5-foot variance. And then in their later slide, it's going towards the updated comprehensive plan goals and also the UDO for 2020. So I would just like to clarify which UDO we are going to be held to. Both UDOs do refer to the transportation plan for our property, which is in 2002 considered neighborhood core because it is a core neighborhood in Bloomington. And in the 2018, in the updated 2018 transportation plan, it is referred to as neighborhood residential, which Patrick had mentioned. It is about protecting the historic neighborhood here. And it is called out that these streets are very narrow and lists a few streets in there. I'd also like to add about the connectivity for some of their criteria of findings of why we don't meet these variances. About injury, to me, it was mentioned that it will connect children to the Banneker Center. I don't understand how it would do that if they have no way of connecting from 6th Street to 7th Street. The only child that it would connect would be our little son, Owen, when he walks out of the gate and across the street. And we really just don't feel that it's necessary for him to have that connection to the Banneker Center. He can just walk out our front door. And it was mentioned that the sidewalk, if it's not there, it will cause injury. I believe a sidewalk that is going to affect our neighborhood, our neighbor Carolyn, that causes injury. A sidewalk that goes into another retaining wall, that's more likely to cause injury if someone had accessibility issues going down a hill and then that leads in a retaining wall, or someone that is visually impaired going down that and it ends in a retaining wall and then they're dumped into the street. We are in favor of sidewalks. I think that it's great. We use sidewalks all the time. We're big into walking in the neighborhood, and that's why we chose to move into this neighborhood. But I would say that unless the city has an overall master plan to put in a sidewalk that connects to 6th Street, this sidewalk does meet all of the variances, and it is there. I feel that everything is compliant. I feel like the UDO is there to be transparent. Government is supposed to be transparent. And I feel like we don't have a whole lot of transparency here, especially in the word of connectivity. It sounds like a lot of our neighbors, you know, a lot of everyone that was here seems like it provides no connection, but the city seems to believe that the definition of connectivity is a little bit different. So I guess I would like to see that clarified a little bit more from the city standpoint. And then also just the mention of the engineering process. I'm not exactly familiar with what that engineering process is, and maybe my husband, Patrick, can potentially speak to this. But when it was mentioned that we may not be able to file for another determinate variance because of needing to go through an engineering process, I don't believe that was called to our attention that we needed to get this piece started. So those are just my findings from just listening in. Sorry that I couldn't be there, but I'll let Patrick take it away from there. Thanks.
Thanks, Rachel. I guess the only other thing I'd like to say is it sounds like maybe there's one other thing going on here, and it's that we didn't actively pursue the variance, and that I will take blame for that. And if a formal apology is needed, and that's what the city's after for this, I'd be happy to make that in any way that they feel necessary. I just got wrapped up in building. It was a difficult process to say the least. It was delayed time and time again. It was over budget. And by the time we got there and got in the home, everybody was saying the same thing to us: don't build the sidewalk. And so we're just trying to, like I said in my presentation, just trying to assimilate into the property. Is it a hardship about the money? That is not being transparent. I'm not being not transparent with that. It is a serious hardship. We have got estimates from between $20,000 and $30,000 to build this curb, sidewalk, and retaining wall. And those are broad estimates. That is a big issue for me, but I spoke with an attorney and he said, do not make it about the money because the city does not care about the money. You could tell them it makes $500,000. They don't care, they don't want to hear it. So I'm not trying to be hiding anything there. That's exactly what I was told. So I didn't want to make it about that. And so one, I would be happy to make a formal apology to the city in any way that suits them, to say that I should have actively pursued the variance. I didn't do that. We just got in there. We started hearing from Mercy Mission about their accessibility issues. We tried to do whatever we could for them, and this is where we are. Thank you.
Okay, so we are back to the board for action.
I have a question for
Sure.
the president of the board. Before a motion is made, can I ask a question to staff concerning the issues of, okay.
Yeah.
So this issue to the staff has come up about the utilities. Is that being, like, they can't come back and ask for a variance if there's an issue with the utilities? That's kind of come up in the discussions.
So I did check the rules of procedure, sorry.
So while you're looking for that.
Oh, I already looked it up, sorry.
The essence of my question is, would the petitioner be able to rescind the request for a variance now to explore that further to see if there's other grounds for a variance? Because once we vote on it, my understanding is there is no further options for the petitioner.
Okay. So
That's my question.
Sure, a couple things. I believe they can pull it until a motion is made, so I'll double check that. But
That's why
or
I'm
ask
holding
for it
off
to
on the
be-
motion, yes.
Yeah, so Also, though, if they were to be unsuccessful this evening, and then new information would be brought to light, they can request to be heard again, and if they get a unanimous vote of the board, those members present, to be reheard, then they could be reheard again. It's a timeline, I believe it's 6 months that they have to wait.
Okay, so if the vote proceeds, and let's follow this through, and it fails for the petitioner, you're saying that within 6 months, if new information comes to light, they can then come back, but they have to get a vote from us, our board, of 100% to rehear it?
Correct.
How do we do that? Do we do that in our normal meeting, or is this done as a,
Mike
like a
can
committee?
pop on if he's here.
Because that's not, that's, I don't think we've done
I've
that before.
never had that.
Hold on just a second.
Hold on a second. Hey, Jackie, this is Mike Rooker.
Hi, Mike.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Mike.
Great.
Mike.
So the rules actually are a little bit different than what you just said. They could be back on the agenda within 6 months, even with a disapproving vote, but the 6 months could be waived if the BZA were to vote unanimously to waive the 6 months and reconsider again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So I just want to make it clear that if the petitioner were to pull the request for the variance now, explore further the issues with the utilities that has come up as another contributing factor, and then they could come back and request a variance based on this new information. Is that correct?
That is also correct, yes.
Okay, that's my question.
So just to,
And, oh, I'm
so just
sorry.
restate what you,
Yeah, please.
restate the options for the petitioner, if you could.
And that, yes, exactly. So let me put it this way. Should the petitioner choose to rescind their variance request now, how would they do so at this point of our procedures? Would they simply, would we need to ask the petitioner if that's something they would like to do, or would they approach the city directly at this point before a motion is made?
The withdrawal could be suggested by anybody. It would be fine for somebody to suggest it, but the withdrawal would have to be initiated by the petitioner themselves.
Okay, it could be suggested, but at this point, there is no point of order for the petitioner to speak.
Mike?
No, but I think the BZA would have discretion to allow the petitioner to do that since no motion is pending.
Mike,
So then what's in front of the petitioner is this, which is there's additional information about the utility issues that could have a direct bearing on the decision of this board. And at this point, I believe it's appropriate if you would like to pull that, get that information and include it in a new request for a variance in order to strengthen your case. Is that something that the petitioner would like to do?
Or, I just want to say, or we could vote, it could go either way, we could deny the petition, and then you would have the opportunity to come back within 6 months to make the request, again, with new information.
Sure, hold on, Mr. McAleer, let me just, okay.
I wanna
This
make
is-
sure that we
That's
have-
fine, this is on the screen, we're talking about E and F. This is from Rules of Procedure. No petition may be withdrawn by the petitioner after a vote has been ordered by chairperson, so we're all in agreement with that. No petition which has been withdrawn by the petitioner shall be placed on the docket again for hearing within a period of 6 months from the date of the withdrawal, except upon motion to permit redocketing adopted by unanimous vote of all members present. So even if he pulls it, you're going to have to vote to let him put it back on.
We could do that tonight?
Well, when he would come forward again.
When he comes forward. So then F is the other option. This obviously only matters if he would not receive the variance tonight. F says no zoning petition which has been disapproved by the board shall again be placed on the docket for hearing within a period of 6 months from the date of the board's original disapproval, except upon motion of a member adopted by the unanimous vote of all members present at a regular special meeting. In all cases involving a rehearing of a zoning petition previously disapproved by the board may require the petitioner to demonstrate a material change in circumstances. So that's the second part there is what the difference is between pulling it or receiving.
Right. So you could go forward this evening and see how we roll, and then if there's material information that's new that you wish to request the variance again, we can decide to hear it within less than 6 months. But you could still file after 6 months if there is additional information, then we would have to hear the case again.
Okay,
correct?
Two
Is that correct?
questions?
No, it has to be, according to item F, it has to be after 6.
After 6 months, unless we allow it.
Unless you allow it by unanimous
Exactly.
vote.
Thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah. Would you have a question? Because there's a lot.
So please.
Yeah, everything's complicated, believe me. The two questions I have would, one, what would happen to the record of everything that's taken place this evening? Would that be, I mean, I am not going to burden these people. I mean, the people have spoken. The neighborhood has spoken. The community has spoken. The community has spoken through the variances. I'm never going to burden these people again with coming back and doing this over. And secondly, I received a letter from the city that stated that the fines would start at $250 a day and be doubled daily to $7,500 a day. So if I were to move forward with rescinding this effort that we've put forth tonight, what would happen to those fines? When would they start?
So the fines, the enforcement is put on hold while you're figuring out this process. So there are no fines accruing currently. And if you were to poll and want to refile at a later date, we would establish a deadline for that later date internally from the enforcement group. And as long as you filed by that date, then fines would not accrue during that time.
Carolyn's photos showed the utilities. I can show you photos of the utilities. I've sworn that I'm telling the truth. The effort is never going to be better than this evening, so let's have a vote.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are back to the board for action.
Can we comment?
You, of course, feel free to comment before.
First of all, I want to give a lot of credit to the petitioner. You're a new dad. I'm a dad. I know how that goes, man. So to you and your wife, and all of you really here, to me, it says a lot about you as neighbors. Having been in that neighborhood, and Bill, I was there for 3 years with young kids, and everything that you're coming from with, again, the safety, all concerns that parents, but non-parents too, just citizens. So I feel like this is really exactly why this commission exists, for this kind of situation, where the overarching with the UDO is understandable. It's long-term, right? It's a much wider plan. It's a much more macro versus micro. But I think given the neighborhood support that you have, that we've seen, that we've heard, again, it says a lot about the uniqueness of a neighborhood like the Near West Side that I think makes Bloomington a very unique place. And that's changing rapidly. And I think we all know that, right? Coming from the lot that has sat there for the length of time that it has, knowing I went to the Banneker Center with my kids, looked at that lot plenty of times, probably walked through it at one point in time. The fact that you've, I think, taken the time, the energy, the effort to create a very beautiful product that very much matches the time period for that neighborhood. And again, do I come from a place where, having lived there, I'm biased? Call it what you will. Historic neighborhoods are a dying breed. And to me, the balance, and I think a person made the point of, we work with a lot of developers here. We work with a lot of people who come in with a ton of capital that are incentivized in a lot of different ways to pour money into it, but also get benefits from that and make money over time. So I think in some, and I'll wrap this up, in some cases where I think the burden falling upon the developer or the individual or the entity to take on something that is costing X amount of dollars to create a need that fits. I think in this case, there's a lot of variables that make it very, very unique. Hearing from the church, hearing from people with driveways, with landscape, I feel like you've kind of put together, to me, what is a very strong case for this being an exception to the rule. Again, the rules exist for a reason, and I think we understand that the laws exist for a reason. But I also think long-term, if this was connected to many other places, and it'd be a kind of a no-brainer situation. But I also think there's a piece to this that, as a tax-paying citizen, I think there should be a much, if we're going to look at this as an either-or, either this falls on you or falls, if there's a middle ground, to me, this is the time to explore that, $20,000 to $30,000, it's a large sum of money, right? So if there's any way this group, we as a group, can find a middle ground to minimize the size, to minimize the impact, to minimize the concrete, the environmental effects and the impacts, the burden, the financial burden, I appreciate your transparency. I really do. I think my hope is that there's room for that somewhere. So that's all.
So, thank you, Tim. I'll just say that it's our job here to come up with criteria if we believe that that this is a supportable determinate sidewalk variance. We have to come up with alternative findings of fact to allow that to go forward. So with that in mind, I'm just going to have a couple of comments as well and see what some of my co-commissioners might say. Having driven up and down the streets today, it was really interesting to see that there's, as a historic neighborhood, it was deliberately planned, and there is a real hierarchy of streets, as everybody's noted, the difference in character between the east-west streets and the northwest streets. And it seems to me that the northwest streets are kind of a complete street, where everything happens in the street. The street is shared by automobiles, by bicycles, by pedestrians. And that's a function of its really narrow width. And depending on different situations, in most situations, sidewalks are highly appropriate and are only a public good. I think that there's been a lot of testimony here tonight pointing out why specifically in this situation, on this piece of property, on this block, it doesn't make sense. And I think that that relates most strongly to the fact that we have a very small, narrow street, and we have a church across the street from this block. And it sets up a special dynamic that doesn't exist in most other places. And driving up and down the streets, I really didn't find commercial buildings or non-residential structures on these north-south streets. So I think that is a unique characteristic of this opposing block face, if you will. And I think that goes hand in hand with the historic character of this neighborhood, which is being elevated very soon. I don't exactly know the time frame, but from a conservation district to a full historic district. So in looking at the determinate sidewalk, the different criteria, I think the uniformity of development of the area would be best served by deferring the sidewalk construction on the lot or tract until some future date. That, coupled with the practical difficulty of the use of the street. The other thing that I wanted, having been at Banneker Center over the years, it's always stressed for parking. And the irony here is that by adding a sidewalk, it diminishes the opportunity to park, which is really the major demand for the Banneker Center. So again, I think we just have an interesting kind of situation. So I would say that could be another reason or a proposed finding that we could use if some of us wanted to put forward alternative findings to support this variance this evening. So that's just some of the things that I've been thinking about in listening to folks here this evening. So if anybody has any further comments, if not, we're ready to make a motion. I don't know, Flavia, if you'd like to say anything, or Joe. Okay. I will entertain a motion. I will be happy to, you want to have? Okay.
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Okay. We'll see how this goes.
I would move for denial of V-0922. Let's vote on that first.
Okay. I would need a second.
Denial.
Okay. I have to have, the motion is for denial. I need a second. Okay, that motion fails. Can I have another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the terminated sidewalk variance.
Do I have a second?
Do we have specific criteria for the approval?
Right, so we will have to craft this.
When you make a motion, you're supposed to be basing it on findings. Those haven't been set, so you'll need to set those. Not just the ones that you referenced
Not
are
just the one?
helpful, but 1, 2, and 3 haven't been done. So you can craft them here, or in the past, sometimes you have continued the petition and asked staff to craft them and done the vote. I think Mike can pop in and correct me if I'm wrong, that it would be continuing this hearing so that you could vote immediately upon discussion of them at the next hearing.
Okay,
We've done both.
okay. If we are, I'm sorry.
Oh, there's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Sorry, just to weigh in, that's correct. You could continue the hearing, that's one option. You could also try to craft them during this hearing. That tends to be tedious and difficult, so
Okay,
it's up to the board.
okay.
Another thing we've done is, based on the comments you've made tonight, we can craft them, send them around to you, get comments. We will want to be careful, something that kind of has come up numerous times, so I feel as a representative of the city, I must say, you can't park on unimproved surfaces in the city. I know that that is commonplace and it's not a high priority enforcement, but we won't want to include in findings that putting sidewalk outside of the existing pavement will hinder parking because it doesn't affect the actual legal parking spaces in this area.
Let
So
me
things
just,
like that.
yeah, let me just address that. The reason for the initial motion for denial was because there's too many things that need to be cleaned up. And if we do a denial as originally motioned without a second, it gives us an opportunity to get this right. Right now, we have not discussed in any detail the reasons for why we would approve a denial. We haven't outlined those. We've talked about certain things just on the surface. But this is a complicated issue, and it deserves the opportunity to have something put in front of us as a board to properly vote on that's clear. And there's way too many questions, and I don't think that the motion should yet be seconded until we have an opportunity to clean up the language. Otherwise, it's wasted effort.
Well, we can choose to
choose
continue
to
the
continue
case.
it, exactly, until we can get the language. But to try to put that together tonight, this is too complicated.
No,
And that,
I
I just
agree.
wanted to explain why the original motion to deny, because it can then be resubmitted to us.
Yeah, correct, and it
Yeah.
puts a big onus on the petitioner.
yes.
It
Yeah.
does, but
Yeah. So that's
their responsibility, not ours.
Yeah.
You can continue, correct, and have us draft those for you.
Okay.
So
So what would occur is we have a
So we'd
motion,
have
so
to
if we,
put- we'd have to
if
rescind the
nobody seconds it, if we give it a moment, no one seconds, then we can then have a new motion.
Correct. So if nobody seconds your motion, or you
don't receive a
you
second,
could
yes.
withdraw your motion. Those are the two options.
I'll let it stand.
Okay. So just in terms of, the process, even if we were to move forward with the, toward that motion, it would be helpful to be able to get the help and support of the staff to,
Sure, I understand that. So
Yeah.
if it doesn't have a second, it fails.
It just doesn't move forward.
it just doesn't move
Right.
forward.
Your denial doesn't, my petition to say yes doesn't move forward.
Correct.
Yes, and I would say, as a staff, we just, because this is a quasi-judicial board, these things can move on to other forums. Making a motion without findings isn't something that we want to do often. So, yeah, if we're going to go for the second, we need to, I'm sorry, sir, you don't,
You can't.
You made a motion. And then.
Sir,
We're past that.
Interrupted her,
We're
Joe.
past
You
that
can't
point. We're at a procedural point here.
Yeah, and you did not follow procedure.
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
Excuse me, we can't have people speaking out of turn.
wonderful, thank you.
So,
Yeah, so if someone does want to second, I think, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, that we would immediately need to have findings presented
Okay.
as part of that.
Okay, okay. So I would prefer for us, that's my position, is that we would continue the case in order to develop the findings but if we don't pass or second our motion, then
it's automatically continued.
yeah, I mean, we would have two sets of findings at that point?
Can I jump in
Yes,
quickly?
yeah.
What I would recommend for clarity right now is that the motion on the table be withdrawn, and then a subsequent motion can be reconsidered, whether that motion is to continue the present petition and to recommend that the staff prepare proposed findings for approval. That would be one potential motion. A member could propose. It might be also helpful to suggest what those findings might be if that's the motion that the board desires to pass.
Okay, because, yeah, we want some direction as to why we're continuing, correct? Okay. Does that make sense?
So if I withdraw the motion, then we make a new one about findings that falls on the shoulders of
The staff.
to then readdress, and the petitioner then has to come back to another meeting to go through those findings that just the staff finds. I just want to make sure.
No, so the findings would be to support,
Right,
the variance,
right.
yes.
No, you can craft them.
But, or we could craft them on the fly
You
right now.
can craft them now, you could craft them later and send them to us, and then we compile them. Traditionally, the board members don't want to do that. They want to tell us here verbally what they want, and then we craft them, but we're happy for you to craft them.
No, that's what we can work together on doing that.
Okay, but just not here, right now. The preference would be to do it later. That would be my preference. Maybe you feel differently.
Again, looking at the continuation of this whole process going on even further, so I would have to craft findings I would have to craft the findings right now to support my motion.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. How much time would I have?
I believe this meeting ends at 9 unless there's a vote to extend it.
I know we've got.
Yeah.
And we have 3 other petitions after
We can
this.
extend, be conscientious of everybody's time here too, but I also think.
I don't see a I don't see a tremendous downside in continuing the case with the direction to craft alternative findings of fact to support the motion, a positive motion to support the variance.
I think as long as the questions the petitioner had of being clear of fines and all those things not being, you said those are tabled.
Yes, I did.
Okay, until we bring back new findings.
Yep,
and
so
have-
when we do an enforcement action,
Until there's
we
action.
contact you and say, you've done something that violated the UDO or your CZC. Once you start working with us to fix that problem, then those fines are not being accrued during that time.
I would just want to make sure that the petitioner knows the legal grounds of that and that they're protected during that interim time period, so. Yeah, if that's the case, then I can withdraw the motion.
Okay, so then we need a new motion to continue with with direction for the staff.
Okay,
I can make it for you. See if you agree, which is I move that we continue B-09-22 for the explicit reasons of crafting exceptions so that we can,
Alternative findings of fact.
alternative findings of facts, so that we can then make a motion for approval at a later date before this board. Would you?
I second that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion? Flavia, do you have anything to add?
I think it's important for the public to understand that the BZA does not vote yes or no. We have to vote based on criteria that were brought before us. So the work needs to be done before we start the meeting on both sides.
Right.
So it's very hard for us to change something on the fly without having facts that substantiate each criteria. So that's why that we are in the situation that we are right now. It's not because we don't want to approve it, or it's because we need specific facts that can fulfill the criteria to move forward. And just wanted to make sure that the public understands that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. We can't, so just to summarize, we are back, the work is in our court. We have to have findings of fact to be able to support our motions. And we're at a position where we need some staff support in order to have our paperwork in place so that we can feel confident that we can vote the way we need to, or the way we would like to. And so that's where we are.
The city will follow up with the petitioner, correct?
Pardon?
The city will follow up with the petitioner, correct?
I don't see any reason.
I mean,
to
let them know when it's going to be.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they'll be, yeah, I mean, they'll know when this is scheduled again, et cetera. And I would hope it would be the next regularly scheduled meeting. There should be no reason why we can't hear it.
And just for the record, can I ask the city to state for the record that no fine shall take place until the next hearing for this continuation?
Yes, as is typical with all enforcement action, as long as they're continuing to work with us. In this case, they obviously are. As we are continuing the petition to the next hearing, no fines will accrue until even be looked at until such time that they weren't in compliance based on the decision made at the May hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. And one other just procedural thing, there's no further notification, public notification or anything like that, right?
Correct.
Okay, good. So there's nothing more that they have to do.
Correct.
Okay. So then we're ready for a vote to continue this case.
Okay, the motion.
So remind us, a yes and a no means.
Yes, okay. The motion is to continue the petition in order to craft alternative findings of fact, to make a motion of approval at a later date. The next regularly scheduled hearing, it has been discussed. So a yes motion is for continuance. I'm sorry, a yes vote is for continuance. Okay. Burrell?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
The petition is continued to our next regularly scheduled meeting, ideally. Thank you. Okay. We're on to case V-10-22, CFC Properties. Can we please have the petitioner's report whenever you're able?
Okay, on to the next. This is petition V-1022. Okay, sorry. The property is located at 101 West Kirkwood Avenue. That is the Fountain Square Mall, located on the south side of Kirkwood, which also has frontage on College and Walnut. And you can see here located in downtown Bloomington. The current zoning is mixed use downtown. It is in our Courthouse Square overlay, and it is also a character area, excuse me, and it is also in the Courthouse Square Historic District. The comprehensive plan designation is downtown, and retail and office is what primarily takes place in the mall area. Surrounding uses are obviously the historic courthouse to the north, offices to the south, Kirkwood restaurant area to the east, and financial institution to the west. The petition before you tonight is a variance request from the multi-tenant center sign standards in Chapter 20.04 to allow additional signage in the mixed-use downtown, again for the Fountain Square Mall. The mixed-use design standards for signage for a multi-tenant center are based on each particular tenant gets a certain number of signage, and then there's additional signage, 20 square foot sign that's allowed as kind of an identifier for the center. We can no longer regulate content as of, I believe, 2015. So the code just says one additional 20 square foot sign. They could really put anything on it that they wanted, but typically that is how they identify the center. This particular multi-tenant center is quite big. It's 46,000 square feet just on the ground floor. It's 3 stories in most places. Again, as I said, it has frontage on 3 streets. So here is the aerial, and the area highlighted here, outlined here in green, is on the inside, Fountain Square Mall. So they have some existing signage. This signage has been in place, I believe, since the 80s when the mall was redone. So this particular multi-tenant center is unique in that it was designed and built to appear as multiple buildings, to still look like a traditional historic street front on all 3 frontages, so that from the outside it's not clear that it's one large unit on the inside. And so the only way to convey that message is through signage, of course. So the petitioners have these existing signs, one here facing south on Walnut, one at the corner of Walnut and Kirkwood, one signage along Kirkwood, and then at the highest corner there of Kirkwood and College. These are all lawful nonconforming signs because they far out, they're much bigger than what would be allowed with just one 20 square foot sign, which is what is allowed. So they were put in before that rule was part of the code, so they can be maintained and updated. And so 3 of the signs, this sign here on the corner, this sign here on Kirkwood, and this sign here at the corner of Kirkwood and Walnut, they will be updated within the code of what is allowed for lawful nonconforming signs. So the letters will basically be popped off, repainted, and new frontage, or excuse me, and then a new signage letters put onto the signs. So that can all be done within code as lawful nonconforming signs. Where the variance is needed is that the 4th sign here that is facing south on Walnut, they would like to replace with a sign that is slightly larger. So you can see the current sign's shape. They do no longer go by Fountain Square Mall. They go by Fountain Square only. So they've done some rebranding in the last 45 years. And they would like to utilize this location for additional wayfaring so that pedestrians and vehicles alike would know that the mall is there, something you cannot tell from the outside by design. So because they want to change that sign, they need a variance. And we have kind of wrapped up all of the sign changes that they're doing into the variance so that we are kind of legalizing all 4 of the signs through the variance since they are changing 1. So we found that that approval would not be injurious, that typical wayfaring for a large development is typical, as well as this is designed in such a unique way for the benefit of the community to look like different buildings, that in order to help it function in a better way, that this would actually be helpful to the community. It will not be injurious to any of the adjacent property. Almost all the signage is existing in the sizes requested. And so that will barely be changing, and that strict application of the ordinance would result in practical difficulties, and that those difficulties are because of the peculiarity of this property. Again, because it is a very large kind of complex that you can't tell is actually there because of the way it was designed in order to look like separate buildings from the outside, for the benefit of the community so that it could continue to look historic, but also on the inside function in a way that a multi-tenant center would. So based on the report and written findings of fact, the department recommends that the BZA adopt the proposed findings and approve V1022. The variance is approved for the sign number and sizes as submitted with the application packet. So the drawings or the renderings that you saw is what would be approved. And the petitioner does know that they would need to receive certificates of appropriateness, likely for all of the signs, but that will be up to the Historic Preservation Program Manager. And then obviously sign permits need to be issued. So with those 3 conditions, we recommend approval, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Jackie. The petitioner is here by Zoom, I assume?
Yes. Let's see. Can you unmute? Oh, there we go. Just a sec. You should be able to unmute, Rebecca.
If you could just state your name, please.
Rebecca Ellison.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to state your petition.
So last Thursday, we did meet with the Historic Preservation Committee, and they did approve all of the other signs that were shown in the document. The only one in the beginning on page 2 is the one that we are requesting the variance for, is on the back side of building 1 on the south side. And that's the one that we're asking for the variance for, just to kind of help improve the wayfinding aspects of the signage, just to kind of help clarify that it is an entrance there and that people can access the shops and other business owners on the lower level. In the past, there's generally a cafe down there as well, and that people do have access to the first level retail storefronts there as well. So we think improving the signage will benefit everybody looking to go into that particular entrance. I think everything else was pretty well covered by Jackie, so I don't really have anything else to say unless there's any particular questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're to the commission for any questions? No questions? Flavia, any questions?
Just a clarification. So did the fourth sign in question, was that approved? Did you get a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Preservation?
They have a picture of it. I don't think they passed anything saying that it was approved, because it was all the other signs that were in question for the certificate of appropriateness. But this particular sign does mimic the one on page 5 almost identically, and they did approve that one.
Okay, thank you.
So can I follow up? So does that mean that they'd have to go back to the Historic Preservation Commission?
Look at the packet, but it sounds like, and Rebecca may know the answer to this, that maybe they wanted to wait for the variance, and so then she would go back for the fourth sign. Does that sound, are you planning to take the fourth sign back, Rebecca, for a COA?
If we need to, that is fine. I guess I didn't realize that would be something that we would need to do.
We can, yeah.
But I can definitely do that if need be.
The way it's stated on the recommendation, point 2, is really like they must receive a certificate, so.
If the program manager says it's, required, I think it says. But, it's odd to me that they would have only seen 3 and not 4. So the fourth will need one, I believe.
Well, I guess the reason that I was going to actually ask about this condition of approval, because I believe that we usually know whether it gets approval first before we actually rule on it, which I believe that's typically the way it goes.
Well, see, it's always very confusing because I think that we have certainly heard cases, and again, I will state it for the record that there's no precedent, but we have heard petitions where any of the local historic commissions have come in and spoke, where they had not actually ruled, or like, not ruled, but had provided either an endorsement or a non-endorsement. That's happened in the past, but.
I thought that generally you go to Historic Preservation Commission before you come to BZA. Because we don't want to legally provide something that.
Yeah, the question is it codified? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the question, whether we have to do that.
Right.
Right, okay.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Okay.
They can be.
But could we?
It's kind of like I would think it's
it is best practice
to not approve something that then, because legally we're actually providing a variance for something that's not going to happen.
And to follow up on the president's comment, which is the item number 2 in the recommendations, it's clearly stated, that takes that away.
Right.
And then the request for variance becomes a little more clean.
Yeah.
And so then this would again be a case where continuance might.
So we would like to know that it's already okay.
So that's, yeah, we can do that. So she has received a COA for the 3 signs. I don't know why 4 weren't done.
Right. Okay, but because in this case it's identical to the other signage, I think it's, I would feel okay making a motion on this one, although I generally prefer for things to be heard before historic preservation before they come to us.
How long would it take to get the COA?
Yeah, to get the COA.
Does the petition, can we ask, is the petitioner still there? How long would it take, or do you know, Jackie?
Well, it's a 2-week cycle, but I don't know, actually, Ms. Clapper may know better than I. If they were trying to get on the HPC for next week, it may already be too late, and so then that's another.
Right, it's another
So then
month.
it's 3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, the application that they submitted to BHPC specifically says proposing to update 3 existing signs. I think it's because, maybe there was confusion, because those 3 signs can be updated like in situ, like as they are, and then this would be a new sign.
Yeah.
So she would need to go back for that.
But to go to the president's point, which is, so currently there are 3 points under the recommendation, that if we were to actually entertain that motion and vote on it tonight, as you're suggesting is possible, the only thing that makes that palatable for not waiting for that is because of item number 2, which is that it's still required. I just think that's putting the cart before the horse. Just let them get the COA, come back, it's an easy vote at that point.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have to agree.
Again, just talking here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I feel most comfortable with that. I mean, it's interesting that what they're asking for is identical. I mean, this new sign will be identical to a sign that they just got approved. So I don't know if that's an extenuating circumstance, just to let this, for us to be able, if there's no legal reason why we can't grant it, I think that I would have a high level of comfort in doing that, since.
Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not believe there's a legal reason. We do approve variances sometimes with conditions where if those aren't met, then they don't get to do the variance. Usually it's pretty buttoned up, and you have an expectation that what they're asking for is going to happen.
But there's nothing injurious about this because it could be done by our next meeting easily. I mean, if they.
It's just that they'll have to wait basically
a month.
Another month.
Was-
So, right.
Understood. So
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying either way. I just,
Yeah, sure.
I have no
Yeah.
real issue because item 2 is very clear.
Yeah, it is. Any other questions?
May I say something?
Sure.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry,
that's
I
the
didn't know
petitioner.
what.
Yes, sorry.
That's the petitioner who's speaking?
Yes.
Yes, if you'd like to say something, you can.
I did pull up the COA, and the approval is for all 4 signs that were presented to them. So that sign was approved. I apologize for the mix-up.
Okay.
When was that dated?
It is April 14th.
Okay, so you have the action, so in the meeting, it was determined, because in the packet, it says 3. So in the meeting, you guys discussed all 4? I'm sorry, you
Yes,
didn't have a member of staff there.
All 4 signs were included because we were trying to show collectively everything that we were trying to do. And on their certificate of appropriateness, it says summary of work approvals. It says installing of 4 signs along with their respective lighting. So all 4 were approved.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Ellison. Okay, any other questions? Okay, then I will go to the public to see if there is anybody here or on Zoom who would like to speak to this petition. There is no one here. So please raise your hand if you are listening in on Zoom and would like to speak to this petition.
Don't see anyone, and I didn't receive any chats.
Okay, then we are back to the petitioner for any final comments. Ms. Ellison, if you have anything you'd like to add at this point?
I don't have anything more at this time. Thank you.
Okay, then we are back to the board for action.
I'm going to go ahead, since I went ahead and jotted down these notes, and let's just see if we're in agreement on this.
Okay.
Okay, so I shall move for approval of V-10-22, based upon the report and written findings of the facts of the petition, and move to adopt the proposed findings with the following conditions. 1, the variance is approved for 4 signs and sizes as submitted with the application packet. 2, understanding the petitioner has received certificates of appropriateness as deemed necessary by the Historic Preservation Program Manager. And 3, the petitioner must receive sign permits for each of the 4 signs before work can be done on each sign.
Okay. Second, anyone? Okay, we got a second. Ready for a vote?
I can hand that to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Clapper?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, the petition is approved. Thank you and good luck.
Perfect. Thank you. It's perfect, thank you.
Okay. Everybody doing okay? Okay, so then we are on to CU-11-22, Hat Rentals, LLC. Staff report, please.
Okay. CU-11-22. The property is located at 202 North Walnut Street. That is the northeast corner of 6th and Walnut. Also in the Courthouse Square Overlay District. Current zoning also mixed use downtown Courthouse Square. Comprehensive plan designation downtown. There's retail on the first floor, and I believe the second floor is currently vacant. Surrounding uses include retail, restaurants, and some multifamily. The petitioner is requesting conditional use approval to allow the use of student housing or dormitory in the MD zoning district. They would like to convert what the second floor currently is into 1 4-bedroom unit for rental. You may recall that student housing or dormitory is a type of multifamily in the Unified Development Ordinance, and if you have any units that have 4 or 5 bedrooms, you are student housing or dormitory, unless you can meet one of the other housing definitions, which is why single family or duplexes or whatever would be excluded from that definition. So even though this is 1 unit, it is still considered student housing or dormitory by code, and because of that, a conditional use is required. So I have included the plans. As I said, they are for 4 bedrooms in 1 unit on the second floor here. They would also be proposing a deck area on the top. I believe the deck area will not be visible, but we will discuss that here shortly. From the rights of way below, you can see it here because of how it is set back to the north of the structure. For a conditional use approval, you need to meet the general compliance criteria. This petition will meet all other UDO requirements, and it is an interior remodel only. So this is in a local historic district, but they're making no changes to the outside. So no preservation commission approval required. And then additional criteria for conditional use includes that the petition be consistent with the comprehensive plan and have adequate public facilities and services. Again, this is right in downtown. Adding units here is in line with the comprehensive plan. Adding small units, especially above existing commercial below, is something that is desired by the city, and there are plenty of public services and facilities in the area. A number of bus routes running within 1 or 2 blocks or directly in front of this property. Again, that the proposed use will minimize and mitigate adverse impacts. 1 unit here isn't expected to have a large destructive impact on the neighbors or surrounding area. There are already multifamily units on the second floors in most of the buildings in this area as well, and typical residential hours are anticipated. This is not the type of petition that is phased, but is one of the criteria, so there's no phasing plan for this. If this were to be approved, we would issue the building permit tomorrow, and they could go in and start doing the interior remodel. So the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings and recommends approval of CU 1122 with the following conditions: that this particular conditional use is limited to 1 4-bedroom unit as shown in the filing documents, and that the compliant minor site plan is required before issuance of a building permit. In this case, that's very minimal. I believe it's going to potentially be 1 or 2 bike racks. So that's something we can do quickly with the petitioner, who has been working with a local architect, someone familiar with the process, and then that a building permit is required before the construction can begin for the interior remodel. I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Jackie. Is the petitioner here?
I believe so. You should be unmuted.
Okay, could you please state your name?
Juan Carlos Carrasquel.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
I actually have no additional comments. I'm just here to answer any questions you all might have.
Okay, thank you. We will get to that. Any questions from the board? Flavia?
No, the presentation was sufficient. Thank you.
So the only question that I have is about the visibility of the deck from the street. I assume that it has been shown that that has no visual impact and therefore doesn't require a certificate of appropriateness.
I may let the petitioner speak to that. Yes, I may let the petitioner speak to that.
Okay, please.
Actually, there is we went through that process already, and the Historic Commission has approved it. So we have a certificate for that deck from the Historic Commission.
Okay, so you have gone through that.
We do have that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we are to the public. There is no one here to speak to the petition. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak to this petition? If so, please raise your hand.
I don't
There
see
is
hands
no
or
one.
messages.
Okay, so we are back to the petitioner for any final comments.
Hey, no comments. Appreciate your help.
Okay, thank you. Then we are back to the board for action.
I'll move approval, CU-11-22 with the following conditions. 1, the conditional use is limited to 1 4-bedroom unit as proposed in the filing documents. 2, a compliant minor site plan is required before issuance of a building permit. And 3, a building permit is required before construction can begin.
Okay.
I second it.
Can we have a vote?
I second it.
Great, thank you. Throckmorton?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the petition is passed. Good luck to you. Thank you. Okay, we are on to our final case of the evening, CU-13-22, Wheeler Mission Ministries. We are ready for a staff report when you are, whenever you are.
I think Eric's doing this one.
Is Eric? Okay, great.
Yes, I'm going to give Ms. Scanlon a break and actually do one of the cases tonight. So this is a request from Wheeler Mission for property that they have at 201 Northwest Plex Avenue. The petition site is zoned mixed-use medium scale and has been developed with a series of office and mixed-use buildings. There are some duplexes that are at their end of West Plex. But this site was recently rezoned to mixed-use medium scale by the petitioner earlier this year. That went to the Planning Commission and the City Council as part of a rezoning petition to allow for this site to be rezoned, to allow for their use, which they are coming forward tonight to request conditional use approval to allow for a supportive housing facility at this location. So Wheeler Missions, real briefly, provides housing for those that are suffering from homelessness and housing loss, as well as supportive research, office space, meeting space, community space. So this facility, they operate at the building to the north, as well as the building to the south at 215, kind of supporting all of those missions. And so they have recently acquired this building at 201 to kind of expand their use into this area in this additional building. So they'll be remodeling the building. It's kind of an open shell. It was last used as a gymnastics studio. So they'll be remodeling the inside to create some housing space, as well as some office space and some community meeting space. As part of this, they will be doing some improvements to the site. The site currently has a lot of asphalt in the front that just is kind of an undefined area and spans between this property and the property to the north. There's a shared access drive that accesses all of these three properties, and that will be preserved, but they'll be cleaning up the parking in the front, installing new landscaping throughout the site. They will also be doing a building addition along the front for a locker area. This is for bicycles, as well as other belongings. So they'll be providing their bike parking through that facility there. And then, as I mentioned, they'll be using the inside for a mix of housing accommodations and then office space, bathrooms, and then just some meeting facility space. So with this petition, as I mentioned, they are requesting conditional use approval for supportive housing. In all zoning districts, you have a list of permitted uses as well as conditional uses. With the conditional uses, they're evaluated on a site-by-site basis. Do they make sense in this area? And so this site here went through a lot of discussion and debate as part of the rezoning process that the Plan Commission and the Common Council had. Both bodies acknowledge that this use is a needed use within the community. This particular location is well suited for that, as Petitioner does operate on two immediately adjacent facilities, buildings. This particular area of Westplex has sidewalks all the way out to 3rd Street. 3rd Street is on a bus route. There's also a recently installed bike path along just to the east of this along West 3rd Street. So there are a lot of facilities that help people get to this location, both by car and walking, bicycle and bus. So the properties to the north of this are city-owned properties and our old railroad right-of-ways. So there's a lot of buffering for this use from adjacent properties, as was somewhat possibly imagined during the discussions of the rezoning. There was a lot of involvement with adjacent property owners to deal with making sure that everybody gets along and that everything is kind of managed in an appropriate manner. And the petitioner is certainly committing to further discussions with adjacent property owners to mitigate any impacts that might come up over time. And have certainly shown a lot of good faith towards addressing the needs of adjacent property owners during the rezoning and a conditional use process. So with that, we are recommending that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve this conditional use request with the 3 conditions that are listed in the staff report and on the screen. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Who is the petitioner here this evening?
Rick Dahl is the petitioner.
Okay. Mr. Dahl, you are unmuted. Can you please say your name?
Yes, Rick Dahl.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
I'll give it 20 seconds. Eric has done a great job. Just for purpose of clarity and transparency, the bicycles won't be inside the locker area. The pavilion with the lockers will be kind of a respite area, but there won't be bicycles in there. It will be a secured area for guests who are checked in and for them to store their belongings. But other than that, everything Eric said was great, and he has been great all the way through this process. And some of this process has been very challenging for us, but we're we're glad, hopefully we're at the end of this. And we hope we can make a positive contribution to the neighborhood and to the community here in Bloomington.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We are to the board for any questions. Flavia, any questions? Nope. Okay, then we are to the public. There is no one here at the moment. Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to speak to this petition?
Don't see anyone, and I haven't, no hands raised and no messages.
Okay. Mr. Dahl, if there's anything further you'd like to add at this point, this is your opportunity.
Just to say thank you for working with us through this, and to thank the planning department for working with us.
Okay, thank you. We are back to the board for action. Do you want to make a motion?
Do you want me to do it?
You want to do it?
Okay. This won't be a sweet bullet. Did I do the first?
No.
I didn't do the first one. You did the first. Okay, whatever. Here we go. Move approval of CU-13-22 with the following conditions. 1, all improvements shall be installed before final occupancy is issued. 2, approved per terms and conditions of Plan Commission cases number ZO-22-21 and number SP-16-22. And number 3, the petitioner will continue to make a good faith effort to address any concerns raised by adjacent neighbors.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Okay. We are ready for a vote.
Great. Ballard?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Okay,
Great.
the petition is passed, and good luck, and thank you for your work in the community, and we are adjourned.